Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marge, and no, I am not an attorney. I am a law student, and just like you, who probably ended up looking for videos like this, looking for materials for your review. Tomorrow we will have our class, and there are multiple cases, 16 in total, that we will be discussing, and this is the case that relates to Chapter 3, Concept of the State in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, wherein we had to discuss cases that were relevant and mentioned in the said chapter, either that has something to do with people, territory, government, and under government. We have functions, doctrine of parents patriae, de jure and de facto government, government of the Philippines, administration, sovereignty, and acts of the state. So in this case, this is Collector of Internal Revenue versus Antonio Campos Rueda, GR. Now, I'm going to go ahead and insert this here, and we are going to place all that there. And at the same time, this has a double purpose because I will be recording so that I have something to also watch when I am going to be reviewing for the exam that we will be having in the midterms and finals. Okay. And so I'm going to make this bigger. And so this is the first case that we had to discuss in our constitutional law 1. Collector of Internal Revenue versus Antonio Campos Rueda, GR, number L-13250, October 29, 1971. And I came up with a short summary of facts, complaints, defense, and judgment. So we have the facts. We have Maria de la Estrella Soriano Vida de Cerdeira, a Spanish national and a resident of Tangier, Morocco from 1931 until her death on January 2, 1955. Left behind intangible personal properties in the Philippines. Antonio Campos Rueda, as the administrator of her estate, filed a provincial state and inheritance tax return. The Collector of Internal Revenue, CIR, initially assessed and received payment for estate and inheritance taxes on all properties. However, Rueda later filed an amended return, claiming exemption for intangible personal properties valued at 396,308.90 centavos, citing Section 122 of the National Revenue Code, NIRC, which provides for reciprocal tax exemptions for intangible property, personal property of non-resident residents if their country or residents offer similar exemptions to Filipino citizens. So, you know, scratch your back, I'll scratch yours, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and vice versa. So the complaint, CIR, denied Rueda's request for exemption and demanded payment of deficiency, kulang, right? And inheritance taxes totaling to 161,874.95. So that's, you were to compare Rueda's claimed exemption versus gusto niyang kunin to, exempt. Gusto nilang patungan, yon. Wala kang kukunin. Magdadagdag ka pa, basically, for penalties and interest. The CIR argued that the law of Tangier, the country where this deceased Spanish citizen is from, said that the CIR argued that the law of Tangier was not reciprocal to Section 122 of the NIRC, and furthermore, the Tangier was merely principality and not a foreign country, as contemplated by the said section, thus lacking the necessary international personality for the exemption to apply. Now, I would probably look up Section 122 of the NIRC, but I probably will not do that, which I think I should, but I will not because I know that my teacher's probably not going to focus on what that is about because their focus is more on the case and what happened to the case. But if you wanted to be smart about this, you're going to highlight this and then you're going to look it up because it doesn't hurt to ask Google, what is about? Section 122 of the code, on the other hand, imposed GRT on other non-bank financial intermediaries or financing companies and on person performing similar financing activities. So, applies if a contract purports to have been made in the name, on, or behalf of a company before the company was incorporated. That's what that meant. The defense, Antonio Campos Rueda, administrator of the late Maria de la Estrella Soriani Vida de Sorderia, said that the estate was exempt under Section 122 of the tax code due to reciprocity. He presented evidence, including certifications from Tangier authorities indicating that transfer of movable properties, which were proven to include intangible property, personal property, by reason of death, were not subject to death tax in Tangier, regardless of the nationality of deceased or heirs. He argued that the term foreign country in Section 122 did not necessitate full international personality or recognition by the Philippine government. The judgment, the Court of Tax Appeals, CTA, reversed the CIR's decision, ruling in favor of Antonio Campos Rueda. The CTA held that, Court of Tax Appeals, foreign country in Section 122 of the NIRC refers to a government that does not impose transfer or death taxes on intangible personal properties of Philippine citizens not residing therein or whose law allows a similar exemption. It concluded that it was not necessary for Tangier to be recognized by the Philippine government as an international person to qualify for the exemption. The Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the Court of Tax Appeals. The Supreme Court reiterated its previous rulings, such as Collector of Internal Revenue versus De Lara and Keene versus Collector of Internal Revenue, that the requirement of international personality, such as the one that the Tax Bureau proclaimed that Tangier does not have a foreign personality. So it's just like nasakupan lang na teritoryo. Tangier is not like a country per se. Nasakupan lang siya ng country that offers exemption for Filipinos upon death, tax exemption on intangible properties. So that the requirement of international personality is not a condition sine qua non for a territory to be considered a foreign country under Section 122 of the NIRC for purposes of tax exemption based on reciprocity. The court emphasized that the focus of the law is on the existence of reciprocal tax exemption, bigayan, not on the political status or recognition of the foreign entity. Therefore, since it was not established that the Tangier provided the necessary reciprocal exemption for intangible personal properties, the state of Maria Sordera was entitled to the exemption from estate and inheritance taxes in the Philippines. So the most relevant answer part is the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the Court of Tax Appeals holding that Tangier qualified as a foreign country under Section 122 of the National Internal Revenue Code, and thus the estate of Maria Sordera was exempt from the deficiency estate and inheritance taxes on her intangible personal properties in the Philippines due to the proven reciprocity of tax laws between Tangier and the Philippines. The court clarified that the acquisition of international personality or formal recognition as a state is not a prerequisite for a territory to be considered a foreign country for the purposes of this tax exemption. And that ends our case brief on Collector of Internal Revenue versus Antonio Campos Rueda, GR number L-13250 on October 29, 1971.